he literally went from essentially nothing to within 6 to 8 months seemingly having a giant tit. So one thing about the Adesanya thing that's notable is during that fight, he had the most brutal gynecomastia ever. And it caused a lot of, like, people were like, you think Costa's on gear? Look at Adesanya's titty right now.
Oh my God. Explain that to me.
Okay, so there's like, ultimately it's like a hormonal input kind of equation where you have, if you have a lack of testosterone relative to your estrogen, or any kind of imbalance as a result of, in general, PED use, you will end up in a position where you're estrogen dominant and you can have glandular development. And for him, the onset was so aggressive and fast that it's really hard to kind of allocate it to anything else other than that. Now, he claims it was his copious marijuana use, which it can have some stimulatory input on breast tissue development, but for a guy who's been smoking weed for years, would it have happened so suddenly and the onset to be so aggressive? Like, he literally went from essentially nothing to within 6 to 8 months seemingly having a giant tit. So like, for me, the kind of hormonal equation thing, it's kind of hard for him to skirt around that. And
I never seen a guy. I've many guys smoke weed, and I never seen a guy hanging with gynomastia, and I never seen that from weed. I mean, is that a thing? I've never heard of that.
I think it can inhibit your testosterone production to some extent. It can have a little bit of it can push you towards developing it, but not in such a dramatic fashion that you develop it kind of out of nowhere, I feel like. So it's really hard to justify and give him the benefit of the doubt. Although historically, it does not really seem like he aligns with a guy who you would traditionally think, like, oh, this guy's on PEDs. Physique hasn't changed substantially. His skill development, I think everything looks pretty aligned with what you would say is, natural, right? Or what would you think in that regard?
The thing is, physique is just one factor. If he's taking gear and he's doing a lot of aerobic work, he's not going to put on muscle. He's not going to put on muscle. And everybody, some guys take gear and they balloon up, and some guys take gear and they get more ripped. They don't really balloon up as much. It also depends on your diet. He's also very ectomorph. So I don't know. I've never heard of a guy smoking weed and getting a tit. Personally, I've never heard that. I saw one doctor trying to break it down and said maybe he got hit and the soft tissue was. I don't think so, man. I don't think that's from a punch.
I had like a big kind of that guy got a lot of heat after he put out his video, because he basically came out with a totally incorrect statement and said it's very rare to get unilateral gynecomastia development where you only have like one side. And it's like, that's the most common type of gyno in guys who are using steroids.
Is it?
Yeah. You will typically get asymmetrical gyno development. So for him, he kind of like fucked his own credibility.
A lot of doctors don't know because they're not trained in that per se. They're not trained in working in gear. They might not know. They're trained in certain realms, and they went out of their wheelhouse, and all of a sudden they're making mistakes because they probably just repeat what they've heard over the years. Just because you're a doctor doesn't mean you're an expert in all medical aspects of medicine.
Yeah, that was one of the things, because I got a lot of pushback on my video because it was like, this doctor came out and said this, and you're wrong because he's a doctor. I was like, bro, get the fuck out of here. So
you'd be amazed how many things doctors don't know. Even basic nutrition, sometimes they don't know. It's like,
yeah, man. Yeah, it's brutal.
But they're not trained in nutrition. They're not trained in gear. They're not trained in PEDs. They're not trained in these things. So they have to research it like everybody else almost. Of course, they have a better understanding of the body, but if they're not in it, if they're not, like, some doctors deal gear, some doctors give gear to their patients. They think it's good, and they have a different philosophy, and that's how they practice medicine. I know doctors who take gear themselves. They think it keeps them healthier and stronger. But if you're not in that world, you might not know. But it was very, very peculiar to me that he had a gynomastia, like he had gyno that fast, that quick, all of a sudden.
It's still there too. It's still there.
It's insane. Yeah. Quite insane.
Yeah. And it's funny because he brushes it off too. Because, like, obviously, who wants to talk about that? I guess, like, if you're in a press conference and reporters are asking you about your tit, like, who wants to address that, right?
Well, look, here's a good. So we could be certain. Let's talk about a case that we know it's a matter of fact. It's not a matter of speculation. Like, if we look at Dan Henderson,